Okay, so we'll start with a few introductions and then we'll get into the content for today. So I'll start. Hi, everybody. I am Paula Wilson. I'm the Member Services Manager at Equity Arc. I'm really excited to welcome you to Pathways 101. I'm going to popcorn it to Mark Hunsberger.
Thanks, Paula. Hey, everyone. Mark Hunsberger. I'm the program director here at Equity Arc. A few months into my role, so I'm digging the work in the team. Excited to be here. And it's nice to see some of you I've only connected with via email. It's nice to see you on this call again. Stanford, I'll pass it to you.
Hi, Stanford Thompson, Executive Director of Equity Arc. Great to see many of you, and thanks for hanging out with us. Am I sending it to Najib? Is that what I'm doing?
Oh, hello, Happy New Year, everybody. Hope you had a good break. My name is Najib Wong. I'm in Philadelphia, Director of the Philadelphia Music Alliance for Youth, or PMA. I guess I'll send this to Walter.
Hi, everybody. I'm Walter Bittner. I live in Richmond, Virginia, and I'm presenting today. Glad to meet everybody. I use he, him pronouns.
Hello, everyone. My name is Razvan Borindian. I'm the new manager of engagement and admissions at Sewanee Summer Music Festival. Very nice to meet you all.
Hi, I am Madison Hookfin. I am the Academy Program Manager with the Columbus Symphony Orchestra, and I run our Pathways program. We're just barely 3 years in now at this point, but I'm the manager and oversee it.
Hi, I'm Melissa. I'm the Pathways and Partnerships Manager at Kaufman Music Center in New York City.
My name is Hannah Muzzy, and I work at the Cleveland Orchestra. I'm the manager of learning programs, and in my new role with the orchestra, I've been doing more work with my colleague who's the director of Instrumental Pathways, and so I'm here to learn more about her work and how our work intersects.
For those of you who just came in, we're just doing some introductions.
Hey everyone, this is Jorge Garza. I am Executive Director of the Segundo Barrio Children's Chorus, which is a community-based, community-run arts education, music education organization based in the 2nd Ward in Houston's East End District. We are new to the Equity Arc cohort. We're so happy to be a part of it. We've recently started a partnership with the Houston Symphony, bringing the first violin program to the Houston's East End District.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. My name is Lena Bond. I'm a violinist and chair of the department at the University of Southern California in Los Angeles. And nice to meet you all. Madison, I used to play in the Columbus Symphony, so it's really nice to see you here. I'm also just been a huge admirer and fan of Equity Arts and Pathways, and just eager to learn more about like how to serve better and how it might be able to work in a city that has a lot of programs, but just exploring. So thank you.
Good afternoon or morning, wherever you are. I'm Earl Ross. I am the chair of the string department here at Walker West Music Academy in St. Paul, Minnesota, which is the oldest founded music school by African Americans in the upper Midwest. I'm also the artistic director for our string ensemble, Kamwenge Strings, which is an ensemble of string, upper and lower string ensemble of a fairly accomplished, primarily Black and African descended string players here in the Twin Cities. We're also participating in the Minnesota Sioux Symphonies, Gitzies, Sinks, the Atari Chamber Music School. And we have been a part of Equity Arc now for about 2 years as officially as an organization. We are also affiliated tangentially through Pathways through the Greater Twin Cities Youth Symphonies, of which one of our students is a scholarship recipient of that scholarship. I am here to learn more about Pathways, but also to think about how Walker West might be a more formally involved organization addressing Pathways and working with Pathways directly. It's so good to see you and meet all of you. Some of you, I recognize some of the faces, so it's good to see your faces again. So
awesome. We're so glad that you're all here. And we see Madison in the chat. Nice to meet you as well. Okay, so without further ado, we're going to get started. We're really excited to have Walter Bittner here. He's currently the director of the Education and Community Engagement department at Richmond Symphony. But before that, he founded Nashville Symphony's Accelerando program, which is a Pathways program. And so he's learned so much throughout the years, and he's going to share his insights with us today. And we're going to have some time for Q&A afterwards. And we'll also be sharing some next steps for any of you that are interested in developing a Pathways program in your own city. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Walter.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here, even as folks are coming in. Okay. Hi, everybody. This is Pathways 101. And what I'm here to describe for all of you today is things to consider when you're starting a Pathways program in your community. And I'm going to start by just telling you a little bit about who I am and how I can speak to this. There's our title slide. I started a Pathways program at the Nashville Symphony. We started the process at the end of 2014, actually, was when conversations began. That ended up in us accepting the first class in 2016. Yeah, 2016 was when they started. They were the class of 2017. So a little bit about my background. I'm a lifelong musician. I started as a boy soprano soloist and I played piano since I was 7. I studied piano and conducting primarily in college and worked as a performer in a lot of different genres, mainstream classical music as well as early music. I became very interested in Renaissance and Baroque music when I was in my 20s. I learned to play the lute, I played the harpsichord. I've played in jazz and rock groups as well. As you can see, I have part of my rig set up here behind me in my studio. And I taught in a wide variety of schools in my teaching career. I started teaching in metropolitan New York City in the early 1990s in 1991. And I taught in alternative schools. I taught elementary and middle school music and performing arts for about 15 years in schools in New York City, Tampa, Florida, and Nashville, Tennessee. And then I started teaching high school in 2007. I started a youth orchestra in Nashville and ran that. And I was the piano teacher at Nashville School of the Arts, which is the performing arts magnet high school in Nashville. And then I took over the choir and orchestra programs after 3 years in the piano department there. I was there for about 7 years, and then I left teaching in 2014 to work for the Nashville Symphony. And here I have some more slides about my background here. Here's what I just told you, and then here's an image from the end of my teaching career. That was a performance of my choirs from Nashville School of the Arts with Music City Youth Orchestra at the Tennessee Performing Arts Center 10 years ago. In 2014, when I went to work for the Nashville Symphony, the first week I was there, my boss, Alan Valentine, the CEO, pulled me into his office and asked me what I was going to do about diversity. And he was interested in starting a fellowship program, but I had been working in music education in Nashville for more than like 12 years, and I did graduate work at Belmont University and had developed partnerships with the Blair School of Music. So I knew the university music scene very well. And I was not confident that that kind of a program would be successful in Nashville. And I was aware that those programs haven't really changed the needle in our industry. So I proposed a talent development program, and we were very fortunate to get the ear of the Mellon Foundation, who were also interested and pursued setting up a program, and they contributed a tremendous amount of funding for it. So the first thing that I did was try to learn from somebody in the field who was doing this work. And the person who was closest to me was Adrienne Thompson, who at that time was running the Atlanta Symphony's talent development program. So I drove down to Atlanta and met her. And many of you may already know Adrienne. If you don't, I hope that you will get a chance to meet her. She has really inspired so much of this work across the country. So a lot of what I'm going to share with you are things that we learned from the Atlanta Talent Development Program and Adrienne Thompson as we were developing Accelerando. When you start a Pathways program, they're all unique. They're part of your community. They grow. If it's going to grow roots and establish itself as a thriving program in your community, it will have to look like your community and come out of it. And it's going to be different from a Pathways program anywhere else. So this is a picture of the Accelerando program students and teachers from the League of American Orchestras conference in June of 2019, before they went to perform at the opening plenary. I left the Nashville Symphony that summer and came to work for the Richmond Symphony in 2019 and worked for them for 5 years through the pandemic. Just as an aside, I did start an El Sistema inspired program here. And I actually no longer work for the Richmond Symphony. I left in September. So I'm now working independently. So before we go on into the ideas about how to start a Pathways program and what's involved, I'd really like to just have a moment of being clear about what I mean by a Pathways program and what kind of program I'm specifically speaking for. So I think that each of you knows your community, and as we go through all these different concepts and components, you'll have your own ideas about where in your community there are resources that you can draw upon and where you might have to work to develop them. The first thing to be thinking about really is who's the program for. Our program is Pathways programs are directly inspired by a certain kind of student who wants a certain kind of experience and a certain result from the experience of the program. So identifying potential students for your program is going to be a big job, and it's going to be a continual job throughout the program of finding students who really show the interest and the promise to successfully go on into careers, which leads me to what exactly I mean by a Pathways program. And what we're referring here to is a program that's intensive and intended to produce a specific result, preparing students for the possibility of pursuing a professional career. Since Pathways programs generally end at the end of high school, a successful student will audition and win a place in a music program at a conservatory or university or college that will best suit their purposes and their needs for going on and doing the next step in their training. It's a training program for students who want to become professional musicians. Programs across the country have different levels of intensity about this this articulation of the goal of the program. And some, they may have to sign a paper or a contract that it says that it's their intention to go on to college, others to study music. Others may not have that requirement. But it's, as we looked at in a previous slide, it costs an average of $9,000 per student, this expenses for each student to move through that program annually, not including administrative costs. So it's an expensive program to run, and so the philosophical point of view that a lot of programs operate from, or at least some do, is that if you're not intending to pursue this intended result of the program, you're asked to leave to make way for somebody who is. I'm not saying that all students go on to pursue this kind of a career, but that is the kind of intensity the training is meant to produce. This is not to say that there aren't very high quality music education programs all over the country that also produce this result for some of their students. But Pathways programs specifically are intended to produce this result for the majority or all of their students if possible. Whereas most music education programs are really providing a wide variety of experiences depending on the intensity with which the student participates in the program. So in your community, one of the first things that you'll be thinking about as you build your program and thinking about who is going to be in it is where are these students going to come from, and what kind of preparation are they going to have before they come to your program in order to ascertain, are they going to audition successfully? Are they going to even know that this is something that they want to do? Pathways programs rely on other music education programs to provide the training for them, that enough training to be able to recognize the potential in the student and to sort of ignite motivation within the student to want to pursue it further. So usually you try to find your students in every possible place they could be, and it's in a community really that your network of other music educators is going to be the key for finding these students. Many of them will come from public schools where they do have hopefully a music program where the music teachers can identify students who have a special talent and a special interest that might be a good candidate for your program. But all of these other possibilities besides public schools are possible: private schools, homeschool groups. Sometimes schools don't have music programs strong enough, or students aren't participating in their school music programs, but they may be very active in their church music program. They may be active in an El Sistema inspired program. They may be active in a community music school, or simply taking private lessons in your community. So having a wide network of other music educators who are providing the rudimentary training in order to find your students is going to be important for you. Another thing to bear in mind as you look for students and you begin is that, when we were running at Celeranda, we found that generally speaking, to be successful, students needed to have these three qualities. They needed to have a certain amount of talent, more than your average person. Most people know that musical talent is pretty cheap. Everybody has some. Most people can carry a tune or tap a rhythm, but we're talking about a level of talent that's a sort of above and beyond. And coupled with that, they need to have a strong motivation to grow that talent and to work at it and hone it and refine it. And then the third leg of the stool is really a very supportive family environment. And what that looks like could be wildly different, depends on the commitment and the intensity of the relationships within the family unit. In many cases, it's an extended family unit was our experience. But these three things are the things that we found were really necessary for students to succeed. If they didn't have all three of these things, they often would not make it through the program from beginning to end. They would eventually leave, because it is a very demanding kind of program to run, demanding on the student and demanding on the family. So from the beginning, it's important that you consider the family, and you are somehow engaging with them in a way that helps them understand the intensity of what their student is going to experience in your program, and that they are allies with you in supporting and helping their child through it. Another thing that you want to be thinking about all along is, who are your allies in the community for building this program? And this is beyond who are the music education experts, the people on the front line who are going to help you find your students. But they're also, a Pathways program is intentionally designed to develop many kinds of skills for your students to be successful. And so you need a number of people to help you with a variety of skills. And you're also going to need to have facilities and other kinds of experience for your students that you may not be able to provide yourself. So when I built the Accelerando program, I sort of called in all my favors. I had been teaching in the schools there for a long time and conducted the youth orchestra, and I knew a lot of people, and I asked everybody to help me. That was the way I was able to make it happen, and that was the way I was able to make it reflect the community. So the strongest allies you're going to have are going to be individual people. They're not going to be institutions. They're going to be people who work at institutions who really respond to your vision and the mission of your program and what you want to provide in your community, perceive that it's important, and it's dear to their heart too. Oops, excuse me, I didn't mean to move on. Those individuals then may be found at any of these other institutions on this list. Public schools, and they may be teachers, they may be administrators. Often people at the administrators or at the district level are former teachers, almost always, sometimes former principals. They know their school districts, they know their schools, they know where you may be able to find help. And they may also have the power to move budget numbers and people within their institution to help you as well. The same goes for private schools, though often their mission's a little different. College and university music schools have a vested interest in recruiting students from their own communities to attend those institutions. So even just on a theoretical level, having a Pathways program in your community, if you have a college or university music school or a conservatory, then it's almost obligatory that you would be having a conversation with them if you're not actually working for them, because many of our institutions across the country are really waking up to this idea of embedding the institution in the community, making their institution look more like their community. So those are people that you would be seeking out. Symphony orchestras are in the same position, though they often don't have all of the same kinds of resources that a college or university music school would have. Those symphony orchestras have people who have done what your Pathways program is established to provide for your students. They have navigated the path towards becoming a professional musician. And many orchestral musicians teach lessons and may be very interested in working with your students as well. How many facilities symphony orchestras have for providing all of the services that you will need to provide for your students is going to differ depending upon your institution. Other nonprofits that work with underrepresented populations also may be very helpful for you to establish as allies, not necessarily music or music education related nonprofits, but those who work with the communities that you'll be serving with your program. Many churches and religious communities have music programs, and some are quite strong. So if you can find allies in those parts of the communities, I don't know how I left off this list community music schools, but it's a glaring omission from the list, and that's where you will find allies, of course, as well as local individuals who just are interested in contributing to something that they believe in. Allies will provide all kinds of things for you. Access to students, as we talked about earlier in the presentation when I was speaking about how are you going to find your students, and also resources. If you don't already have an institution that is interested in sponsoring a program, one of those institutions in your community may be interested in doing that. They may be able to help you with your financial aspects of running the program. They may be able to provide classrooms or rehearsal spaces for you, meeting spaces. They may be able to provide staff, teachers, and other kinds of facilitators for workshops or any other kind of training that you're going to provide for your students, which we'll get into later in the presentation. They may be able to provide this these resources as in-kind donations or at a discount. A lot of programs that are interested in your mission and share may be willing to offer some kind of discount for your students to participate in their music education programs. And then you may find allies as you're building and getting your program off the ground who can form a sort of a council to help advise you as you go through. When we started at Celerando, we had a steering committee that met for the first year once a month, and after that quarterly, and it was drawn from the head of the public schools music education initiative, the head of the pre-college program at Blair School of Music, the head of Conexión Americas, which is a nonprofit that helps students, families from who have immigrated to the United States assimilate into U.S. culture, and that's where we held the meetings. And then somebody from the local community music school. So we had a number of people on our steering committee who would make suggestions about where we could find the resources, about pacing, about how we could go about things when we met with challenges. They gave us a sounding board to work through ideas. That was a very helpful stage in starting at Celerando, is that we had this committee that met once a month as we were getting the program off the ground. And when things get tough, it's really important to have somebody there to help support you, who is in it with you, and you don't feel alone in your community, trying to provide what is really a pretty heavy bill of services for your students. And through all of this process of identifying all these people, you'll build your team. And this idea of the team is something that I first heard brought within this context at a convening by Anthony McGill, who's the principal clarinet of the New York Phil. You may have heard him speak about his team too. Anthony grew up in Chicago and went to Merritt, and he spoke, as a very successful professional to a group of people doing this work, about how important it was to him still at that stage of his career to have established all of these relationships when he was a young musician, because those are still the people who support him through the difficulties of his career. And you are going to be establishing the team for your students. If you do your work right, when they graduate from your program, that won't be the last you hear from them. That you will become part of the foundation of their network upon which they build their career. So you need to have your own team too to support you through this difficult work. And that team provides the legs of the program beyond graduation and into our musical culture by providing people who participate in your program in a lot of ways, but ultimately develop relationships that last a lifetime. So I spoke a little bit about a sponsor, Where's Home. And if you're here on this call on behalf of your institution, you may have already identified this step, but it is going to be important for you to be clear about sort of where your home is. And it might not stay the same as your program grows. But it's really important to have that sort of to figure out where you're rooted in the community, and where's the hub from which you're going to be doing all of this work. So before I go on to talking about the program components, I'm going to stop here and ask if anybody has any questions.
Yes, I have a brief question.
Yeah, go ahead, Madison.
Yes, I really wish I had seen this presentation before we began our Pathways program, because your discussion of needing a steering committee is exactly what we're experiencing right now, is having kind of that team behind you to help support and provide resources and recommendations. So my question would be do you have any advice for going about building a steering committee, if you're in a place where you kind of already have your Pathways program in place?
Well, sure. I mean, I would think that if you already have a program in place, then you already must have some allies who are helping you do it. You're probably not doing it all on your own, but you may have certain components of the program that you need help or support in bringing that you're not able to bring yourself. So you'll need to look at your community about who, you want to find a way to make your program also support the mission of your allies who are helping you with it. So generally speaking, there are going to be people involved in education, right? And not always, but some people involved in music or arts education. And those allies will see the value in what you're doing and see that this could also really help them, or they may have an idea about the way in which they do it. But I wouldn't go with my hat in my hand and my hand out. I would want to showcase the positive aspects of what you're already accomplishing with your program for them. If they're not familiar with your program yet, try to get them to come to a recital or to meet students the students often are the best ambassadors for your program, the ones who are thriving in this high level of intensity and immersion in classical music. Those students are the ones who are going to be best able to sell your program to possible allies.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Any other questions before I go on to the components of a program? Okay.
I'm sorry. This is Earl. I realize. So I'm sorry. This is Earl. I'm gonna just put myself on another just really quick question. And part of as part of the conversation and as I'm listening to this, I am also thinking about the issues regarding to ensure being careful in some communities where there may be multiple pathways organizations or multiple organizations doing this work, and to be really careful about how we are not saturating or oversaturating is perhaps not the right word, but I know from a community perspective, our communities are often pulled in all kinds of directions. And so I'm wondering how you think about this, or how we should be thinking about this as we start a program. Obviously, in larger cities, it may not be as big of an issue, but in smaller cities where the communities of Black and Brown folks may be relatively small and may be pulled in all kinds of directions. So I'm just wondering how we might want to be thinking about this as we approach this. Should we be doing some due diligence around other programs that may already exist, so that we're not creating something that may already exist or may already have started, to ensure that there's going to be a successful pathway, no pun intended, for the students to connect?
I think you're absolutely right, Earl. And I didn't put a slide about that in here, but you all know your communities. And when we started Cheloranda, there was no such program like that. There was not an active pre-college program at the one major music school at Belmont, and at Blair, there was not an underrepresented population as part of the pre-college program there, for the most part. So we were setting up a program in which there wasn't another program doing the similar work. And I think also being clear about what it is that's unique about your program and what you are providing, the kind of intensive training that you will be offering your students, is not usual for most music education programs. Though, as I said before, there are many great music education programs all over the country who do provide a lot of this, and often it's enough alongside what the students arrangements may be for private lessons or other kinds of things that support them getting into music school. But I would say if you have another Pathways program in your community, that's the first door you need to knock on, absolutely, and make friends with the people running that program, and perhaps, you know, determining whether you really need, your community can support and really needs another program like this, because it's very intensive. It's quite expensive at $9,000 per student per year. And not every community is going to be able to produce a large number of students who can participate at that level of intensity year after year after year. You'll have attrition every year, as once the program's up to capacity, ideally you'd be graduating students every year and needing to find new students. So having that healthy network and relationships with others, and if there is another Pathways program in your community, you're going to want to do things together with them. Did I answer your questions or comment on your statement? Thanks, Cyril. Any other questions before I go on here? Those are great, and that's why I stopped, because there's a lot of information here. So we're going to go into the components, and this list of components was revised a little bit for this year's Equity Arc survey of our membership, but it's pretty similar to the one that came out previously, but all these numbers have been adjusted for the current census, in which 18 Pathways Collectives members participated and gave their data. So we know that 94% of our programs offer college preparatory advising, 61% offer some kind of mental health and wellness programs, 89% of them offer some kind of mentorship program, 89% also offer music theory, but 50% less than that offer any kind of music history with any kind of structure. They all offer performance opportunities, which is great to hear, since their students in the programs are preparing for a performing career. They all offer some kind of continual support and advisory meetings and a specialized curriculum for each student. Most of them, 78%, offer mock auditions, and nearly all of them offer some kind of performance reviews and juries like they will face in college, and many of them already do because they participate in community music school programs. We're going to go through these programs one by one and talk about them in a little more detail, but the first thing, before we do that, I just want to stress the importance of the private lesson teacher for each student for instrumental training. It's probably the most important relationship the student will have in your program, the teacher that they work with. Ideally, they'll work with the same teacher throughout your program. We find that kind of a stability really is beneficial for our students, though occasionally they do need to change teachers while they're in your program. But a successful relationship with a private lesson teacher could last a lifetime. I know many musicians who stay in touch with their teachers they had when they were young people throughout their lives, it's they're a model for them of somebody who's done what they want to do and is trying to help them find the steps to do it themselves. So not only are they providing that kind of model for the student, but they're also responsible for the most close vigilance on the student's progress as they help them week by week through their private lessons and the development of their skill set and the development of their understanding of the repertoire and all the other experiences that are necessary for a successful musical career. Your teachers will work alongside you to focus what they do in their lessons, hopefully, and align it with all of the other components that they're working on simultaneously through your program. And they will be primary for delivering a lot of these components, including preparations for their auditions, preparation for their work in ensembles, which is a very big part of all Pathways programs, really, is the experience of playing music with others. They will, depending on the character and inclinations of the teacher, they will also provide some modicum of mentorship and help the students prepare for other aspects of a professional career. And though most Pathways programs have found that the level of music theory understanding and accomplishment that is really necessary for a student to be successful entering college is beyond the scope of a private lesson, they will be addressing music theory in their lessons to ensure that students understand what they need to be doing to a certain extent, and hopefully providing some music history too, though the level of intensity for music history is somewhat less of a requirement for most students at this level of their development. So going through the components one by one, college prep advising is a big part and a big concern of our programs, because we measure the success of our programs by if our students have won their auditions to get into the school and study with the teacher that they want to for college or university. So there are many ways to prepare for this, but certainly auditioning for their youth orchestra in their community and participating in mock auditions is a very important part of the process. When they go to audition for college, it shouldn't be the first auditions that they've done. They're learning how to audition through your program. There may be other kinds of college preparatory courses that you require for your program, or for individual students who may have special needs for those particular resources. You will be meeting with the families who often don't understand the intensity level of preparation necessary for college auditions to help them support your students to the program. And then Pathways programs provide a lot of financial support for the nuts and bolts of the application process for college, including the cost of the applications themselves and producing the recordings that are now a standard part of the procedure for applying, as well as travel expenses relating to traveling to actually do the auditions. Mental health and wellness is something that has become much more of a vocal concern in education over the last decade or more. And this is something that almost all Pathways programs are concerned about, whether they have formal arrangements to take care of that. About half of them already do and provide various numbers of, they may be one-off workshops with people they may be hiring special advisors for students who have particular needs. You may also find that some of the musicians who teach in your program have a special interest in doing this, whether it's teaching a yoga class or teaching students about routines they have for rehearsal and performance, for focusing, or things like that. There's a wide variety of music-related topics that are being addressed now by musicians within the professional sphere, and mental health is definitely a part of that. It goes alongside wellness. It goes alongside mentorship, because a successful musician usually has to find some way to cope with the intense stress of working at a very high level in the music field, being able to play your A game every time you go on stage for rehearsal or performance. So mentorship takes a variety of forms depending on where the student is in their path and what they need. A middle school student just starting in your program is going to need a very different kind of mentorship than junior or senior preparing to audition for college. And so that's why all of our programs provide this kind of individualized instruction. But ideally, the mentorship opportunities that you establish with your program will become part of your students' team in the future when they leave your program. Music theory is a pretty intense requirement for students. Students should not be going to college and encountering music theory as a freshman in college. It's usually quite intensive by that time, that if they don't have enough understanding to feel like music theory is not a burden for them. So in some cases, students are required to take a music theory class until they pass the AP music theory exam or the equivalent. It depends on what the program's requirements are. But the idea that studying music theory is part of understanding your work as a musician is an important component of our programs. Less so with music history. Music history is it's something for providing a context of understanding for our students about the music that they're playing, and to be able to identify the style and play it correctly, but also speak about it and appreciate it at on a deeper level. So there are a variety of strategies for providing music history to students, but it's largely, in a lot of programs, it's not done on a formal basis where the student takes a class in music history and reads a text or writes papers or anything like that. It's more often provided within the context of the private lesson. What is this music that we're studying in our lesson? Where did it come from? And why are we learning it? Also, a lot of programs require students to attend a certain number of concerts every year to become familiar with the repertoire, and often they're required to write about them. So that's an experience that can help students gain this music history context. But it's individual to the program, and also some students may have more of an interest in music history than others. And I think that only about 40% of the programs offer music history as a formal part of their program, whereas about 90% offer theory. Performance opportunities are key. Your students are preparing for a performing career. So no matter what else they do in your program, they're going to need to do this. They're going to need to perform on a regular basis. And that takes a variety of forms, but usually it includes all of these things: recitals, juries, playing for master classes, and performing in an ensemble. If the students are preparing for an orchestral career, ideally they're going to play in the youth orchestra in your community, whether it's part of your institution or belongs to another institution. Your community may not have the appropriate youth orchestra experience for them, but they may have a fine concert band or a chamber music program they can provide, they can participate in. I think that there are a few of the 18 Pathways programs who participated in the census who don't have access to a youth orchestra program, and that's why students participate in a different kind of program. But it's pretty key to preparing for a career. They need to know that this is, what it's like to play in an orchestra if that's what they're pursuing as a career. Your staff will be busy with advisory meetings at key points throughout the season or school year, whichever term you like to use. And hopefully not too much beyond that, but sometimes advisory meetings are very important also for helping get students back on course, or in any group of students, some are going to really thrive with your program and be hungry for more and do everything, and others are going to have difficulty. And it usually falls down to those three things: the talent, the native talent, the motivation, and the family support. If any one of those three things start to flag, you're going to need to have advisory meetings to help support one of those three aspects of the tripod. And it really is, and like you'll have in what in the public school they call an IEP for every student, an individualized education plan. Every student will be sort of going through all these different components, and their good standing in the program will be based on how well they're able to fulfill all of these components. And their private lesson teacher is your key ally in these advisory meetings, and often they're asked to come to these meetings as well if there are any issues. Mock auditions are just what they sound like. Auditioning without a position to win. You're doing an audition, but you know that it's just for the experience of having the audition and receiving a critique on it. You're not actually auditioning for a position, but it's practice. It's another part of practicing for what will ultimately determine the success of your program, whether they're able to win auditions. Juries and performance reviews are a pretty standard feature of music schools, whether they're university or community music school, doesn't matter. Usually it's a performance opportunity, an opportunity to receive feedback on what you've learned from others within your program. In some programs, the jury might be composed of the private teachers of all of the students in your Pathways programs or a selection of them. In other cases, that it might be a jury or performance review through a music school program that is your partner in this in providing the program. But in any case, these are very important for students to experience. It's another thing that when they go to music school, they'll already be familiar with. So that's our list of components, and though they're crucial, all of them, they're not all equally crucial. And it will depend on the student and the goals for that student, how intense every component needs to be provided. But nearly all of them or all of them are going to be crucial to your student's success. Any questions about the components before we go on? Okay, so financial support is not really the emphasis of this presentation, but I'm not going to just not say anything about it, because it is definitely a big concern for those of us who have run Pathways programs. Where are the resources going to come from to provide all of these components? So currently, you can see that this is the kind of support that the 18 Pathways programs who participated in the census provide for their students. 3/4 of them provide funding for purchasing instruments, or just purchase them for their students. Almost 90% provide rental for their students. I think there are philosophical there are shades of philosophical points of view about purchase versus rental. Some of it is availability. Some programs try to give the student who's graduating from their program an instrument that they can go on and be successful with. In other cases, they may be helping the family to provide that resource for the student, or find another way to fund them having that kind of instrument. Also, depending on what instrument you play, can really influence how much funding you need to have a really fine instrument to be successful in college. Almost all of them provide travel assistance for college auditions. And almost all of them pay tuition for their students to participate in a youth orchestra or other large ensemble program. Almost all of them do the same thing for chamber music. A lot of programs provide both kinds of experiences for students, both large and small ensemble, and it's all paid for. Almost all of our Pathways programs provide funding for students to go to summer programs. Summer program, generally speaking, the summer program experience is sort of seminal for students in the Pathways programs. It's really when the rubber meets the road for them. A student who in high school goes and has that kind of experience where for most of the summer, for several weeks in the summer, they are sitting side by side with the other students they're going to be auditioning against to get into college, and doing the work day in, day out for weeks that they are working towards having a career, and is a very important experience for them. They may find that it's the most thrilling experience they've ever had in their life, and this is what they want to do, and they may not. And it's really important for them to have that experience. So most of our programs provide funding for the summer music study. Many provide assistance with transportation so they can get to all of these activities that they're doing. Most students are going to be doing a private lesson every week, an ensemble rehearsal every week. They may be going to a concert that week, or they probably are taking a theory class that week, and they're almost always required to be on all of their school programs as well. They're very busy, and often the resources for the components are not located within a single institution. So they may have to travel and go to different places throughout the community in order to fulfill the requirements of your program. And finally, almost all of the programs provide private lessons for their students for free. I don't have numbers for these things, but these are also expenses that are incurred by Pathways programs. The $9,085 per student per year figure, which is the current average among Pathways programs, doesn't include paying staff. Somebody's going to have to run your program and will need to be paid to do it. Another thing that I noticed that I remembered is that somehow background checks always seem to get left off of budgets, but it's something that you need to do often, especially if you have orchestral musicians or other people teaching your lessons who don't work within a school district. You may need to provide background checks for people working with minors. You're going to need to do some kind of marketing promotion. That you're going to need to have a budget for that, so that you get the word out and people know about your program, and you have to keep letting them know. You have to let them know about your successes as well as your auditions. You need those performances as places to show off how vital your program is to potential donors and allies within your community. Most programs require students to attend concerts. When we started at Cello Rondo, students basically were required to attend a classical series concert every month. They just were immersed in it. So not only were they learning about the music that they were playing themselves, they would learn about the music that was going to be performed on upcoming symphony concerts and see their teachers playing in the concert. And the teacher would often speak with them about what was coming up and tell them what to look for, like, with a tuba player, we're doing pictures and I get to have this solo, and you get to share those things with your students. There are a lot of opportunities for students to really take on this work of becoming a musician themselves, that they can learn just by going to the concert hall with their families as well. The concert hall really became a tool for helping families understand what we were working for. And then don't forget food. If you've been a teacher, you know that food builds community. Budget for food. You're going to need to have food on hand every time you have your families, or nearly every time, come to some kind of recital or gathering. Feed your families. If you can, do an annual dinner, something like that. Those are important things to do as you're growing your Pathways community. So where does the funding for all this come from? Because it's a lot of money. It's going to come from a variety of sources. And ideally, your sponsoring institution believes in what you're doing enough that they're going to set aside some money, some funding for it, but it probably is not going to be enough. And you're going to need to enlist all avenues, go after all avenues of funding in order to be able to fund your program. If you're lucky, you'll find a philanthropic foundation to support your program, but it may not be at the level that you need. So you're going to need to go to individuals. You may need to speak to religious organizations. You may have community partners who can provide resources for your components towards fulfilling that $9,000 price tag for each student in in-kind donations. So you're not actually paying out that much money because other institutions let your student participate in youth orchestra at a reduced discount, or go to a summer program at a discount, things like that. There are government funding sources that you can go after too, but the changing legal climate around who is allowed to participate in programs like this may impact your wish to go after those funding sources, because they will tie your hands in certain ways about who can and who cannot participate in your programs. So those are sort of case by case sources for funding that you may want to look at carefully before deciding who you want to contribute to your program. And that's what I'm going to speak about: finances. That could be a whole other presentation, I think, finances. So let's see here. I'm getting towards the end here. So once you've done all of this planning and the strategizing, and you have a sense of who your allies in the community and what they can provide for your students, and feel confident that you're going to be able to launch a program that provides this suite of components for all of your students, and you have a sense of how many students can your program support financially with your resources, but also how many students can your community provide year after year to participate in an intensive program like this. You can build a plan to scale your program. Here's an example. It's knowing that it's an individualized program for each student, you can scale your program and basically target how much you're going to spend each year for your budget and how much money you need to raise based on how many students are in your program. So as an example, in the first year, you could accept 6, second year you add 5, and those 6 continue, you have 11, but if one drops out, maybe you accept 6, you know, and it will change. Whatever your plan is, I promise you, by the time you get to year 4, it will not look like this. It'll be different than what you planned. But it's good to have a plan, but it's good to know that your plan is not going to work out exactly the way you planned it. The plan is just a direction, really. And when students graduate, then you'll need to add more students to your program to make up for those students who left. So designing the whole thing, you know, you have all of these things go into it, and you bring it all together into your design before you do your launch. So how you're going to find your students who are going to participate. You're going to work as you identify those students to engage a commitment and from your families as well as the students. And that means you have to educate your families and your parents about the program enough that they understand that they're not surprised when they realize their child is doing something after school almost every day for your program, and often on the weekend, that they have to practice every day. You want them to know this going into it. Determining where all the components are going to come from, get the funding to support it, and then determine a timeline to launch it. So as an final example here, this was the launch timeline for Accelerando when we launched it in 2016. We accepted 6 students from the community. And the idea was to add a small number of students each year until we got up to 24. 24 was the number I came up with because it's a good number. I was a choir director, and I also used to teach dance when I was an elementary school teacher, and 24 is a good number of students to work with. You can separate them into all kinds of groups and have and it's a large enough group to do things successfully with, but not so large that people get lost in the group. I'm not sure if they're still operating around 24 students, but it's close to that. It was also felt that that was around the capacity that the Nashville Symphony could support. If you want to do the ballpark math, 6 students for that first year would have cost $54,000 and change plus paying staff. So you can do the ballpark on it to figure out how much it would cost to support 24 students plus staff. But these are not inexpensive programs to run, and it's why we ask such an elevated level of participation from our students and their families. That's the end of my presentation, and this is the time for questions and answers. Also, if you're interested in speaking with me, this is my contact information, and I have a website. I used to write quite a lot for music education publications around the country. It's sort of moribund, but I am going to be using my website more now and in the future. There's a lot of writing about music education on there and music history and things like that. Thanks, everybody. Any questions? This is the question and answer part.
Oh yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry, Lena, go ahead. You raised your hand. I can wait.
No,
there are a lot.
no, please go ahead.
You spoke of your program again. Thank you for the presentation. So one of the things that pops in my mind immediately are well, there are several things, but the first is really, you talked about the program itself, but I'm wondering specifically what were some of the challenges, or what are some of the most challenging aspects of supporting and administrating this program, or a program like this?
Yeah. Well, anybody who works with high school students today knows that what is demanded on successful high school students today is not like what it was demanded on them a generation ago. They have a lot of things competing for their attention, and chances are that if a student is in your program and they have already a sort of level of instrumental accomplishment to succeed in your program, they're also taking AP classes at their school. They're also getting demand. They may be in the robotics class or the debate class or the student government, or they may want to play a sport. So there are a lot of competing demands on high school students. Some will change their mind, but I think what was more of a challenge in my memory was that not all the families understood the demand. The student who was in it might understand the demand, but the family might not. And they might have very different ideas about what success looks like for their child than you do. And that's why I really stressed at the beginning the importance of the family. I mean, financial pressures are definitely going to be a challenge. And the other big challenge I had when we started the program was explaining to people in the community what it was about and who it was going to serve, because there wasn't another program like it in the community. And most people were not able to understand why we were going about things the way we were to achieve that specific result, because they couldn't just think of another program they knew of and think, oh, it's like that program. It wasn't exactly like the program at the community music school. It wasn't exactly like the pre-college program. It had a very specific goal of serving underrepresented students, but it wasn't based on financial ability. So there are a lot of things to explain to people that that was new. That was a challenge, and it continued for quite a long time. I would say also that some of the challenges were finding the right teacher for each student. The right teacher is really important. The communities from where the Pathway students come are not often the traditional communities that classical music students come from. And so the kind of demands that are necessary for a student to succeed needed to be accompanied by a certain level of understanding about how to best bring those demands to students who come from a different community, because they weren't always students who are going to go to the pre-college conservatory program. Those are the kinds of challenges I recall, but when I see others who are running programs on here who probably could speak to it very clearly, because they're in the middle of those challenges right now. Anybody want to share anything? No.
Well, thank you for the response, Walter. It sounds like there are a list of things that we have to sort of calibrate as we go through this. And the thing that sticks out to me is the defining the what and the why seems really critical. The other thing that seems, and this may be for you and others who have done this, and I know I have a very particular way in which I work with my students or work with our students and our families, but it's also being careful not to be a program that is that comes off as missionary work, which I have seen in some places when this has happened, which can also create not just barriers, but also a kind of challenge or walls between the programs and the families and the students, because there isn't this sort of embracing of the students and the families' culture. So what are the ways in which that is mitigated? Is that something that you all discuss and address? I know I have a certain way in which I'm doing it. I'm not a Pathways, but it sounds like a lot of the things that we already do, obviously, in many ways, actually reflect what you're doing through Pathways. We just don't call it that. But I'm just curious in terms of how you all address these issues, because I think this is also, there's often been a real challenge in terms of keeping students and families connected to these kinds of programs.
Well, I think that if you're lucky, you're going to have a diverse group of families in your program, and communities, getting to know people in your program will go a long way towards establishing a rapport that helps you get through difficult times. And the ways that people develop that rapport is through shared culture often. And I mean, I feel like it can't all be business. You know, you're trying to establish lifelong relationships for your students, and so you have to provide a level of attention to those in your program and their families as human beings, and make them all feel valued, and allow them to share of themselves as they are able, which will vary. We had one family that was Pakistani that would bring us an amazing Indian dinner every year for the staff, you know, and they got a lot out of being able to contribute in the way that they were able to contribute. And if you take the time to get to know your families, the chance that they're going to be able to support their child and stay with you through it is really important. And another thing that I don't think that we all think about is that, yeah, not all of our students are going to go on to win a chair in a professional orchestra. But I was told that there's something like 50 or 60 graduates of the Atlanta Talent Development Program teaching music in the school systems around Atlanta now, because that program has been there since the 90s. And those students went through that program. It is embedded in their community now, and they had an experience that allowed them to provide that gave them a level of training that allowed them to pursue this path. And then those former students are now sending possible students to that program. So the work you're doing, if you do it for your community, not only for this goal, but also for this goal for your community, then they will be there to support you. But we do have to take the time to allow them to contribute as they are able, and to make the program in some ways reflect as much as possible who they are. There's a big movement in classical music right now in our country to do this, to use our art form to reflect our communities through the music we play, through the people who are on the stage playing it. That's what the work of this is. And so I think there's not any one thing that we will do, but it's all of these things that we try to do. And some of them will work, and some of them may not work now, or they may work in ways that we don't expect or see, because, you know, the dividends are far in the future, like those former students of Atlanta TDP who are now teaching in Atlanta. Who else has a question? There were a lot of hands up. So, Lena?
Yeah, hi. Thank you, Earl. The first two questions that you asked were just at the top of my mind too, and so I really appreciate that, and for all the answers, Walter. Mine are now, since you kind of I really appreciate those answers and the discussion. Mine are now kind of whittling down to a little bit more nitty-gritty. Some of the larger ones, do you mind if I just kind of throw them all out at there, Walter, or do you want them?
Go ahead.
Go ahead. Okay. Okay. I was gonna say, like, actually, and now my mind is just spitting in so many directions. Earl, the conversation about, how to not come across as missionary work, I think, is something that I've struggled with my whole career, bringing classical music, to communities, and trying to think of what that means. I was going to ask, for most Pathways programs, do the teachers go through some sort of training to talk about, I mean, because at our school, and I think a lot of, universities and conservatories, decolonizing repertoire, theory and history especially is like really a large part of what everyone's trying to grapple with. And so I think if young people are going to concerts and they're learning theory and they're using repertoire that's, sort of traditional canon is what I would say. I think that might, I'm just wondering if most Pathways programs have, teachers, let's meet once a month and let's talk about where you're taking your kids, and that sort of thing. So that's one question I have, and then I have a bunch of others. But do you know, does anybody else know? Maybe Paula or anybody, Walter?
Well, I can say that these are ongoing concerns of all these programs, and
Right.
and ideally that the students are working in, if they're playing in a youth orchestra, the youth orchestra director is grappling with those programs, and they're going to play Coleridge Taylor alongside Beethoven, in their rehearsals in youth orchestra, or they're going to play, William Grant Still or Florence Price. They're going to be introduced to these musicians and their music much younger than we were, and alongside this new definition of the canon. A lot of programs I know have at some point experimented with cultural sensitivity training, anti-racism training, various kinds of experiences to open your mind and look at things in a different way. And that's a case-by-case scenario, depending on the institution, what they feel is appropriate, what they feel their institution is ready for. But I think that if you have a teacher teaching in your program, and their student is not white, that they're definitely going to try to find ways to help that student feel like this is my tradition too. I can participate in this. So I think a lot of that work is ongoing, and there's no one way to do it. We're all trying to figure out the best way to provide a fertile ground for whatever the new musical paradigm is going to be for the next generation, but in a way that's more inclusive of everybody, and doesn't reflect the values of previous generations, which are very different than what we're going after right now.
I appreciate that. Okay, thank you. Do you, I was going to say, do you have a sense of the amount of the ratio between staff to student? Is there like how many staff are normally employed? Are staff given salaries that are livable? Are they mostly part-time? Are they full-time? I'm trying to think of like I have no training in business, background, and just the finances is a little bit overwhelming. Trying to think of also some of the are the teachers setting prices? Does the Pathways program set a price for a teacher? And then one of the biggest questions I also had, just kind of going through your slides, is there a cap for like the financial income of a family before they're eligible to come into a program? Or do most Pathways programs, just do it case by case?
I don't have the answers to all those questions, but I will tell you that running a Pathways program is definitely a full-time job, and could be more, depends for more than one person, depending on the size of your program, the number of students you have in your program. There's a lot of variance among programs around the country as far as the size of enrollment in the programs. Do they pay enough? My experience with when you talk to music educators is that they never say that I get paid enough. So I don't have that experience that from people telling me they feel like the pay is comparable, but it must be enough because people are doing it. But we had 24 students in Accelerando as the ideal capacity, and when we started it, like, we didn't have a manager for the program, and that we hired Kimberly, who's here on the call, to run it in 2012 January 2016, right? And we had auditions, and then we started the programs, and she was working full time. But it was within a department where she had other things she could help us with as the program grew. But eventually, it became a full-time job. And I think the consortiums around the country that were started after Accelerando in Philly and Boston and Chicago, and those programs had many more students at one time, and they still have more, I think. And they are providing their resources from a suite of institutions, but I can't speak to the numbers. But Najib, how many people in your program now?
We have about 40 students in the program. We have 2 full-time staff. So each staff member oversees a portfolio of 20 students about. And that's just on the advising side. We have, about 30 teachers in the program. This is down from last year where we had 50 and the year before we were at 65, but also still 2 staff members. So I think our upper limit now is around 40 or 45 students. That's the max I think that we would go. A year where we would typically have 5 to 7 seniors graduating from the program. This year we have 5. Last year we had 6. And on top of the other things that we do administratively, marketing, recruitment, event planning, all of the above. So bringing them on tours, stuff like that. So there's a lot. I would say it's 2 full-time jobs per position. Let's just if you have any questions, you can let me know.
All right, any more questions? We got 5 minutes.
Yeah, we have 5 more minutes. I don't know if there are any pressing questions, but I know Mark and I wanted to share a few things with you all before we headed out as well. But I want to thank you so much, Walter, just for this awesome presentation. And we really hope that this is helpful for you all. And we want to make sure that this is really just the first step. So if you're interested in taking steps to start a Pathways program, feel free to reach out. We would love to support you on that journey, whether it's through basic advising that we have available to our members through office hours, or if you'd like to develop a personalized plan and strategy, we also offer discounted consulting services. There's also other ways to connect, like through our Pathways Collective, which I'll have Mark share about in just a moment. And we also have a convening coming up April 4th through 6th, 2025. That's happening in Chicago. We really want you to share your voice and perspective on different projects that we have coming up that we're going to be moving forward. We're going to be talking so much more about Pathways and also about other ways to support musicians at each stage of musical development. We also have a number of virtual events coming up, like our winter member meeting happening on February 4th from 12 to 1 p.m. And we're also continuing our college prep series. So there's lots of ways for y'all to get connected, but I want to toss it to Mark for some final words on the Pathways Collective.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks, Walter, too. This was great. I wish in my previous work, I was hip to all of this stuff in advance. That would have been great. Share a little bit about the collective. We have 20 members right now, and it's a national network of programs that are doing this exact work that Walter outlined. And his program that he helped start, Accelerando, is a member of that. And I see we have some of the Accelerando team on the call here. So some benefits to being a part of that. Obviously, you have to be a Pathways program. But we have monthly meetings with the program managers where we get to check in, share kind of best practices, or bring pertinent issues to the table that programs might be considering either locally or maybe even nationally. We also offer each year our Equity Arc Pathways Orchestra, which is connected to the convening that Paula mentioned. So they happen concurrently. And members of the collective, their fellows from their programs are eligible to audition for that orchestra and then participate. So this year we have 64 students from programs through that collective that are part of that orchestra. The roster's on our website if you have an interest to peruse it and see who's all there. But it's an incredible group of very talented young students. Some other things we offer, Walter shared some information from the census, which is something we do each year. And we're finalizing that one for the previous year, which includes some of the numbers you saw already. And we'll make sure that's available to you. It's a nice, I would say, snapshot, but it's a little bigger than a snapshot. But it has a profile of each of the programs and then highlights and talks about some of these big trends or programmatic components that you heard about in the program or in the presentation today. So if you're already doing Pathways work, just starting, it's a great place to kind of see what else is out there. The idea that there's a lot of alignment around this work, but it's not always the same pathway, no pun intended, that gets us to the end result, right, of how we serve these students in our community. And then we also do a number of data projects as well. So we're working on a kind of musical milestones mapping project now for benchmarks of students at various grades and experience levels. And that's being done by members of the collective and also some outside voices as well. And we also work on best practices across the field. So in short, it's kind of an incredible network of folks who are all doing the same work that we're passionate about. And there's kind of unending insight about how they do it in their communities and how it may connect with what you're doing. If you're interested in joining that, you can follow up directly with me. There's also more information on the website. I think Paula shared the link in there, and there's an interest form you can also fill out as well. Or if not, I'll happily share the link if it's something you're interested in potentially becoming a part of. And Walter, I'll follow up with what you said. I think our entire Equity Arc team is going to be at Sphinx Connect in a few weeks too. So if any of you all are there, want to connect in person, please reach out.
Absolutely. And thank you all just so much for being here and thank you again, Walter, just for your amazing insights. It's so helpful. So thanks so much. And hope you all have a great rest of your afternoon.